Did you know that a staggering number of JavaScript developers struggle with inheritance? It's a fundamental concept that can make or break your understanding of the language. And today, we are taking a deep dive into the topic that is going to be our entry point into the inheritance in JavaScript. I'm talking about prototype and prototype chain in JavaScript. So let's take a deep dive into why mastering these concepts is essential for you. Greetings, dear friends, fellow programmers, and those aspiring to be. Welcome back to Marko Code Academy, a place where we are mastering object-oriented JavaScript in a video series. And before we can get started with the actual topic of the day, which is prototype and prototype chain in JavaScript, I think we need to address the elephant in the room, which is what is a prototype in JavaScript? This term is being thrown around all the time, but me personally, I had a lot of issues to actually get to a point where I can understand what it is and what it is used for in JavaScript. So I do not want you to feel the same about it, which is why we are here today, right? So a prototype is an object from which other objects inherit properties and behaviors. And you also must be aware of the fact that every single object in JavaScript has a prototype object that is created for it and can be used as a template for that particular object. A good point of reference here, and a nice way to imagine how this works, because in the future we'll be using this type of terminology in a couple of videos you'll see, we can say that prototype is a parent that passes its behaviors and properties to its children, and the children inherit those behaviors and properties from its parent, which is a prototype object in this case. Do not worry, things will start making much more sense very soon. Let's head to our IDE and see how prototypes work in real life. So, what do we have here? We have created an animal object which contains a species property, and we have immediately assigned a value of dog to it. And also we have a method which is called sound, which is at disposal of our object called animal. And when we invoke it, we'll just print a woof woof message because it's a dog. Now, this object right here is a very simple object without a class or a constructor function or anything like that. But when we use Object.getPrototypeOf method on it, we will see that prototype object was indeed created for this object. As we already mentioned, every single object in JavaScript has a link to its prototype object, which we can access through the method that I just showed you, which is Object.getPrototypeOf method, and then as parameter we send the object we want to fetch prototype of. And when we run our code example that we have and invoke the getPrototypeOf on our animal object, we will get an empty object. That is because nothing from this object is shared. But it doesn't mean that prototype object doesn't exist. It does, but there is nothing noteworthy about it. But we'll see how this changes over time in our examples. Now, to make sense out of this, let us create another instance of an animal object and check everything again. Now, to create a copy of our animal object, we must use Object.create method, which is again on our disposal out of the box in JavaScript. When we do that, basically what will happen under the hood is that prototype of animal object will be used to create a new instance of an object that will have the same structure as the object we used as a blueprint or a template for creating this new object. So our animal object will be used as a template for creating our new dog object. And when we have done that, we can set that our dog will have a name property and its value is going to be body. And also we want to print out the species of the dog object and also invoke sound method on it. Now, when I run this, let's see what happens. As you can see, our species gets printed pretty well and there are no issues there. Also, we can successfully invoke the sound method, even though we did not explicitly specify it on our dog object because we just said that we want to make a copy of our animal object. And now we have the proof that we did a good job there and have successfully created a copy of the animal object. That is all because of prototyping. Now, how this works under the hood is even more interesting. When we have created a copy of our animal object and put it into a dog variable, and after that we have specified that our dog object will have a name property, we have basically said that when we try to access properties from our dog variable, we will first look for them in our dog object instance. And if we find them there, which will be the case when we try to access the name because we specified it on this variable specifically, we will fetch and return that specific value. But if we are trying to access something that was not defined explicitly on this variable, like species, we will first look on our dog variable and the value that is stored in memory for it. We will see that there is no species explicitly defined for it. And then, because we have created it as a copy of the prototype of animal object, we will look for the value for species in the animal object instance that we used as a blueprint for creating our dog instance. I hope this makes sense. And this concept that I just mentioned is called prototype chain, because when you try to access something on an instance of an object which was created as a copy of already existing object and its prototype, then we are going to look for its properties by going up the chain until we find the actual value we are looking for in some of the previous instances that we were using to create this latest instance, which is exactly the case for our species property value. As you can see, we did manage to find it, and its value is the one that we used for our animal object, but we did not explicitly specify it on our dog variable. So basically, how things will work in our case is when we try to address some property and access it, for example, we will first be looking at our dog variable. If we do not find it there, we will then look for it in our animal object, check whether it exists there. If it doesn't, then we will be looking for it in our object prototype, which is the prototype object we mentioned exists for all the objects. And if it doesn't exist even there, then we will just return null, because it doesn't exist. It's not defined on this object type. And when you think about it, this chain allows a lot of very powerful mechanisms and gives them to us at our disposal. But we are still not done. We need to expand our knowledge and understanding about these concepts even more if we want to call ourselves true masters of the prototyping in JavaScript. So let's head to our IDE once again and see another example I have in store for you. So, what do we have here? As you can see, I have just extended our animal object and have created another method for it called it. This method will be, of course, a function because it's a method, and when we invoke it, we should print the name of our animal and we just say that it's eating. And when I invoke this newly created method on our dog object that was created before we have created our eat method, remember that, what will happen? What do you think? And also, what do you think will be the result when I print getPrototypeOf of our dog object? So let's run this and see what happens. As you can see, we have successfully printed that body is eating. Everything seems to be working perfectly fine. And also, here is our prototype object for our dog object. As you can see, we know that species is dog. We know that it has sound method and also eat method, meaning that all the reusable things from the animal object are actually in the prototype object of our dog object, which perfectly fits our previous image of the structure and hierarchy here. So we first have our dog, then we have the animal, then we have the prototype object, and then we have now. And do you know what is the best part here? Well, the best part is the fact that we are no longer creating unnecessary copies of our methods for each instance of objects, meaning that our animal object and dog objects have the same eat method and also same sound method. They are reusing one single instance of a method. We do not have two instances, one for each of our objects, as was the case when working with our constructor functions before. So here, we are way more optimized when it comes to memory usage and also speed and performance of our entire application, which is awesome, you'll agree, I hope. Now, let us talk about constructor functions and prototypes. Did you know that constructor functions use prototypes as well? When you create a new instance of an object, it automatically links to the prototype of the constructor function. Let me show you. And what do we have here? We have our constructor function called animal. It has two properties, name and species, which you should be familiar with at this point, because in the previous video, we covered constructor functions in depth. So if you did not see that video, I highly recommend you to do so because everything will make much more sense at this point. But what is different is this part right here. As you can see, we are using animal.prototype.sound, and that is going to be our method for the constructor function that we are using for our animals. And indeed, when I create a new object from this constructor function and invoke its sound method, everything will be working as expected. Generic animal sound was printed perfectly fine, meaning that our Charlie here will have actually access to the method that we created by using animal.prototype.sound. But what I want to show you here is even more exciting. I will create another method for our animal constructor function and show you that we can indeed access the name of our animals through those methods. So what I have created here is another method called sleep. And inside of it, we are printing the name of the animal and we state that that animal is sleeping. So when I invoke it on Charlie, we should receive the output that Charlie is sleeping. And also, I will create another animal, so we'll create a new instance of an animal object and invoke sleep on it as well. And we should see two messages right here. Charlie is sleeping and Bella is sleeping. So let's see if that is the case. And as you can see, that really is the case. And the best part here is the fact that there is only a single instance of sleep method created, even though we have two objects of animals, meaning that we have managed to solve by using prototypes one of the great disadvantages of using constructor functions, meaning that by using prototypes we can surpass it and make our code behave perfectly fine. That was a tough lesson. Did you manage to pull through? I sure hope you did. And I want you to congratulate yourself and be proud of yourself for making it this far. Because this was a really tough concept to grasp. And as a reward for you, I have a very nice surprise. The next video is going to also be dedicated to prototypes, but this time it will be a real-life example in which we will be building a library using prototypes. And that I hope will make you very interested to subscribe to the channel and make sure that you do not miss that upload, because it's going to be fun and also educational. Thank you for watching and have an amazing day. Happy coding!